For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kerry Davidson. I am very lucky and privileged to be the director of the Grampians Integrated Cancer Service. And on behalf of the Grampians Integrated Cancer Service Governance Group, the GICS Consumer Advisory Group and the GICS project team, I welcome you along to our forum today. Just to the next slide, please, Vicky. I would also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet, the Wadawurrung people, and to pay my respects to elders past and present, acknowledging their continuing connection to land and waterways. I would also like to give voice to some of the startling statistics that we often see and know that remind us that although in Australia we see some of the best cancer outcomes in the world, there is also great inequity and that gap continues to grow. Aboriginal Australians are on average 14% more likely to be diagnosed with any type of cancer and have a 5-year survival rate that is 20% lower when compared with non-Aboriginal Australians. I reference these statistics in the context of ongoing work that is being undertaken both by GICS and the broader Victorian Integrated Cancer Service Network in implementing the optimal care pathways for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Move on to the next slide, please, Vicky. Our session, a brief session outlined today, we are going to have a number of presentations and I will provide a bit of an overview of those presentations in a moment. Essentially, we'll hear from all of our presenters first. We'll then move into a moderated Q&A session. So I would ask that if there are questions of individual speakers along the way, that you please put them in the chat along with who you would like that question to be directed to, and we'll circle back to that afterwards. We are hoping that there are some questions. It's always hard to answer everybody's questions because everybody has a different background. So it's great if we can make these presentations more meaningful. So please feel free. We encourage you to ask those questions. Following those sections, we'll provide a brief overview of our annual report and some of our future directions for the year ahead. Moving on to the next slide, please, Vicky. And so our topic today is around achieving well in the Grampians region, and we've divided this into 3 different sections in today's program. In the first section, our emphasis is on enhancing health and wellness during cancer treatment. In this section of the program, there will be 2 presenters, the first of which is Sarah McKinnon, who will be talking to us about the Why Wait for Wellness program that is run at the Ballarat Regional Integrated Cancer Centre. After that, we'll hear from Jessica Thomson talking about the intra-infusion exercise program that's operating in a BRIC chemotherapy day unit. The middle part of our program today focuses on the inclusion of patient-reported outcomes in the delivery of clinical care. And the final part of our program today is around achieving meaningful co-design in our project delivery. So without further ado, I will go on to the presentation section of today's program. And by way of some context, in 2020-2021, GICS ran a service improvement grant program. We were lucky to be able to provide funding to 5 projects, and unfortunately, due to a range of factors, some of these projects were more delayed than they may have set out to be. Today, we are hearing from 2 of those projects, and these projects are essentially in the domain of enhancing health and wellness during cancer treatment and very much speak to the broader goals of the GICS work plan in relation to the improving of wellbeing and support for all the Victorians affected by cancer. So our first speaker today is Dr. Sarah McKinnon. Sarah is a senior clinical psychologist and interim manager of the psychology department, Grampians Health, Ballarat. Sarah has a special interest in psycho-oncology, having completed her major thesis on coping with chemotherapy treatment and has worked in the oncology setting since her completion of her training. Sarah was the clinical lead for the development of the BRIC Wellness Centre model when the building was under construction, and was also the project officer for the optimising the capabilities of allied health workforce in prehabilitation with cancer patients, a project funded by the then Department of Health and Human Services. The Why Wait for Wellness program is a multidisciplinary program with dietetics and exercise physiology. Today, Sarah is presenting on behalf of the team, and I hand over and thank you, Sarah, for your presentation today.
Thank you, Kerry. I think I've done the right thing. Can everybody see my slides? No one's saying no, so I'm assuming yes. Yes, thank you, thank you. Yes, thank you for the introduction, Kerry. And I'm going to be talking about the evaluation and regional expansion that has been underway for our Why Wait for Wellness program. So I'm speaking on behalf of a broader team. Don't know why it's not changing. Oh, there we go. So there's myself in the team. I'm a clinical psychologist. We also have some dietitians, Amy Smith and Melissa Jones, and Tracy Duggan, exercise physiologist, and Karen Pengelly, our AHA. We've been conducting this research with the team and with the assistance of Alicia Sainer and the Associate Professor Anna Wong-Shea, and some research assistants, Cara Hill, Krishna Varkal, and Chris Nielsen. So I want to thank everybody for their input. So the Why Wait for Wellness program evolved in response to an identified need. It's kind of been a work in progress over many, many years. It was initially, the first version was initially focused on weight management. The dietetics department were receiving quite a large number of referrals for people who had gained weight during their cancer treatments and during the due to the sort of increased risk of recurrence associated with higher body weight. There was a feeling that perhaps we needed to start to look at this from a group context because the referral volume was quite large. The dietitians felt like they were repeating the same message over and over again, one-on-one. So we thought, let's put this into a group. And we utilised a model that had been already in operation through our allied health department around a healthy weight management program and adapted it for the oncology population. So this then evolved into more of a prehabilitation focus after we completed the optimising the allied health workforce in prehabilitation cancer care, and we introduced some broader topics into the second version, which is how the version has then continued to look over a number of years. And then during COVID, we adapted that to an online live group during COVID. So when the opportunity for a service development project came along with the GICS grants, we decided that it would be a really good opportunity for us to do some evaluations, so that rather than it being an evolving program that looked like what we wanted it to look like, that it would have some more consumer input and actually be, providing a service that is indicated by our consumers. So the aim of the project was to evaluate the acceptability and feasibility of virtual delivery and compare that with face-to-face delivery of the Why Wait for Wellness program, to develop the program further, the content based on participant feedback, and also to develop referral processes to enable early access. So the main focus of the Why Wait for Wellness, which is why it has the name that it has, is getting this information about, so evidence-based information around diet, around exercise and stress management and sleep strategies as early as possible in the process of engaging with treatment, in the hope that it can support people's self-management during their treatment and hopefully reduce the likelihood of some of the more longer term impacts of treatment on people's health and well-being. So what we have, the objectives that we set out, so we wanted to have a look at our referral rates and sources. We also wanted to have a look at which patients were actually attending the program as well as who was getting referred. We wanted to look at consumer satisfaction with the content. And we also wanted to have a look at and compare the uptake of the virtual versus the face-to-face programs. We wanted to describe and compare the experiences for attendees at the virtual and face-to-face programs. And we also wanted to have a look at sort of staffing resources. We found that virtual program delivery was a lot more resource heavy than face-to-face delivery, particularly with the sort of setting up of the program. So we wanted to have a look at those factors. So the plan that we set out, we've had an initial phase where we looked at, obviously had to do the ethics application. We've done a file audit and looked at retrospective evaluation forms from an earlier 12 to 18 month period around the pre-COVID times before we had the face-to-face option. and have a look at the sort of retrospective data on that. And then the prospective program was aimed to have a look at both programs using evaluation forms, one-on-one interviews and a focus group. So I will come in a moment to where we're at now. Phase 1 is complete. So we submitted an interim report from phase 1 at the end of January, and I'll be now presenting some of that data. So the characteristics of the patients over the period of time from the 1st of June 2019 to the 30th of July 2021. So there was 100 referrals between that time, but that is only looking at the cohort who actually attended a face-to-face program during that time. So bearing in mind that from about March 2020 until July 2021, or maybe June 2021, we were only offering it as a virtual program. We then had a couple of sessions where it was face-to-face, and then it was back to virtual again with further lockdowns in 2021. So it looks like an 18-month time frame or 2-year time frame, but it actually isn't that long a time frame for people attending a face-to-face program. So of the referrals that we looked at, we had 52 females and 48 males. The average age was 64 years with a range of 28 to 86, and 50% of our participants were from the 3350 postcode of Ballarat. But this next slide will show that there was a reasonably wide distribution across our Grampians region. Obviously, it's much heavier in that 3350 area where it's that darker sort of yellow colour, but we did have participants from right across. The distribution for diagnostic groups, obviously it's largely made up of people with a breast cancer or prostate cancer diagnosis. I'm not sure whether this directly reflects the same sort of population data for these diagnoses, or whether it's perhaps related to things like the care coordination models that happen for those diagnoses. We will be looking at that a little bit further as we complete the project. At the time, the referral sources we had, pretty much close to 50% of them were from BAROC, within a reasonably even distribution across other referral sources, but a few, maybe a quarter from the Oncology clinic. One of the things that we felt was really important to note from this was that there were no referrals coming from surgical oncology, and given that this is a prehab focused program, that is definitely an area that's going to require a bit more liaison and development. In terms of the time between diagnosis and getting a referral to our program, so we looked at 91 records. We had to remove the highest and lowest from that because there was such a large upper number, but it's still actually quite a large upper number for this slide as well, and we suspect that's because of people being referred for the program when they've had a recurrence. So their original diagnosis date is quite some time earlier, but also encouraging to see that there was a lower range of 7 days, because ideally that is what we would like to see, is people being referred as early as possible. And then the time between referral and first appointment was around an average of 45 days. So that seems to be reasonably doable, but we probably would even like to reduce that further, and hopefully have done so. We also had a look at evaluation forms. So on the previous slide, you'll see that it was 69 cases. So it was all people who actually attended. We took out the data for participants who didn't attend or declined. And we looked at 57 evaluation forms from that time frame, which actually equates to a pretty good response rate of 82%. We do get them to complete them at the end of the session. And so that obviously helps us get more forms in. So part of the evaluation forms, there's a question around, do you plan on making any change after attending the Why Wait for Wellness sessions? 50 of the 57 answered yes, which is great because that indicates an 88% intention to make a health behaviour change after attending the program. And when asked about the importance of making that change, the average rating was just around 8. So this is on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being not very important at all and 10 being extremely important. And then we also asked about their confidence as well in making that change, which was sat around a 7 or an 8 as well, which is on the same sort of scale, 1 being not confident and 10 being extremely confident. So these are questions that come out of a motivational interviewing framework that looks at, are people likely to make a change in their behaviour? And, obviously we're not very likely to make a change if we don't see that change as being important, or we're not confident in our ability to be able to do that. And part of this process is seeing what people might need in order to enhance their confidence. So if we were looking at this in a clinical context, we would look at these lower numbers and work with those people around what would increase their confidence and what sort of supports they might need in place. So in terms of the session content, we asked about whether people found the content helpful or how satisfied they were with it. And the average rating for that was around an 8 on that same kind of 1 to 10 scale. The one who rated a 1 for the Catalyst and Exercise and Cancer video, we looked back and found that video hadn't actually worked on that date. So that was explanation as to why that person wasn't able to rate that as particularly helpful. But again, averages that we find indicate that people are generally finding the content quite helpful. So now we're at phase 2, and we are still kind of compiling the data and analysing the data. So phase 2 was where we started to look at the face-to-face and virtual comparison. So the virtual challenge with this was that once face-to-face groups resumed, we actually found very few participants opted for virtual. It was really difficult to get anybody to attend a virtual program, and we kept scheduling them and cancelling them because we couldn't get people wanting to attend them. There was which we feel is the information that we were looking for, that people will attend face-to-face if that's their preference, and it's a much higher preference amongst our cohort of patients. So we actually only ran 2 virtual groups in the time frame of the prospective design, when we were hoping to kind of do about a 50-50 split. And one of those groups, we actually only ran session 1 because session 2 was cancelled due to people not being able to attend, and those participants then attended session 2 of a face-to-face group. So that was an interesting and unexpected finding for us, considering the geographic sort of location of a lot of our patients. So we're currently having a look, doing a similar look through the demographic data that I've just presented from the retrospective with our prospective arm of the study. We have completed the one-on-one interviews. They were completed in August, and we've also completed the focus group. And we're currently compiling the data and doing a qualitative analysis. However, we did do a cursory analysis of the one-on-one interviews. So there were 12 interviews conducted. And the themes that we identified from our cursory analysis were that there was a lot of conversation around increasing awareness about the program. So the people who generously offered their time for a one-on-one interview indicated that they felt there wasn't a lot of marketing around the program, that they felt that early access would be really important, and a couple of people suggested maybe a opt-out rather than opt-in model. There was a request for more sessions than just the 2, so it was a 2-session program, and there were lots of discussion around the benefit of the face-to-face and the opportunity to connect with others that came from joining a group. There were also some requests around maybe some slightly more practical strategies to be included, and around conversations around a follow-up or a check-in after attending the program. So we took these themes to the focus group, which we had 8 participants in the focus group, and that was 8 of the 12 that had done the one-on-one interview. And we found the outcome of the focus group cursory analysis was that there was a lot of discussion and around increasing awareness amongst the medical staff about what the program is and what it offers, and with some participants saying that if they had been asked, strongly advised by their medical by their doctors along the lines of, I would really like you to attend this program, they felt they may have been more likely, that people would be more likely to attend if that was to happen. There was definitely a lot of support for an opt-out version. So thinking about people actually just being scheduled in to attend as opposed to having to make that initiation themselves. There was discussion around a hybrid face-to-face and virtual. So there was of those that had attended the virtual program, they did feel that there was a convenience in that if they didn't live in the local area, and that they didn't feel there would be any concern with being a virtual participant into a face-to-face group program, provided that there was some good moderation of that. So we had avoided that. So it was interesting to find that the consumers felt that that would actually be okay for them. Obviously, looking at more practical exercises was discussed. We floated the idea of including actual exercise sessions as part of the program, similar to what we offer for our cardiac and pulmonary rehab programs, but there was a very resounding response that they didn't feel that was necessary, and that would actually slow the process down if they had to have an individual assessment prior to attending the program, and that they felt that it would be much better to keep the program separate to the exercise and then referrals to exercise physiology as part of attending the program, and doing that separately would be better. We discussed content and enhancing and increasing some more detail in the content, and they felt that adding the fatigue management with OT would be helpful, more detail about fear of cancer recurrence or progression, and how to manage that. And also they requested a session around looking at, or some information around how to actually access credible information. So if you're doing some Dr. Google searching to find out information, how do you actually tell the information that you're getting is evidence-based and credible? There was lots of discussion around roadmaps for what to expect around their cancer treatment experience, and we felt that that was probably a broader discussion around attending the cancer services in general, as opposed to the Why Wait for Wellness program, but it's certainly important that it came up a lot. And there was support for having family members and carers present. Those who had done that felt that that had been incredibly helpful. And also there was definitely support for a follow-up session or a booster session, so an ability to attend another session a few months later for some boosts. So where we're at now is we need to complete our data analysis and have a look at more detail around the qualitative analyses. And we're also currently redesigning our program and hoping to launch the new version in November. So we're looking at a 3-session program. We're going to add OT, including the content of a session called Fed Up with Fatigue into the wellness program. We're looking at each session being a standalone session, so that we'd be encouraging people to attend a 1, 2, 3 sequence, but if it's more timely for somebody to start at session 2 or 3, they can do that. And we're looking at doing some goal setting at the end of each session. So setting a goal based on the content of that session and looking at their importance and confidence around that goal. And then the 4th week of the month would be us looking at a follow-up phone call to the participants from a month prior to see how they've gone with their goals and see if there's anything that they need, any referrals made that haven't already been made, and that sort of thing. And then we're looking to hopefully reevaluate that after we've completed 2 programs of the new version, but we'll only be looking at evaluation forms when we do the reevaluation rather than the in-depth interviews. So challenges and lessons learned around this project has been that a virtual program as a standalone is actually not what the majority of consumers want. If in-person is also on offer. So that was a little bit of a surprise to us. As Kerry mentioned in her introduction, lockdowns really made this very difficult to lock in a protocol for how we were going to design this project, and led to quite a lengthy delay with it. but we did sort of get there in the end. And also just feeling very strongly that when you are doing a project like this, that there does need to be some clinical free time for the clinicians involved in the program, which wasn't sort of part of the budgeting for this particular program, and that perhaps simplifying our protocol if timeframe was short. We realised after we'd started that we'd taken on quite a big project, and there's been a lot of work happening in the background, but I think that information that we've got from that has been really helpful. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for your presentation, and I assume the technology will catch up with me soon. I might just ask you to turn off your video, Sarah, as we move on. I'm not quite sure what we're seeing on the screen, but that's okay. I now want to move on.
Sorry, I stopped sharing, so I've...
Good, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hopefully it will catch up with us when we move to our next presenter. That was a really great presentation. Thank you so much, Sarah. There was certainly a lot in that, and I imagine it's probably sparked a lot of questions from people. And I just want to prompt you to please, if you do have questions, put them in the chat. It's a great opportunity to ask the actual presenter those things that you are burning questions for you. I know I have some as well. The second of our presentations today in this section of the program is from Jess Johnson. And this is also another of our projects that we funded in the last of our grants rounds. This is a very innovative project and sought to explore the possibility of introducing seated exercise to patients whilst receiving infusion chemotherapy. I'll just quickly read Jess's bio. So Jess is an accredited exercise physiologist with 12 years of clinical experience, 8 of which have been part of the Oncology exercise physiology team. Jess has a passion for ensuring patients get through their treatment and out the other side in the best way possible. And I hand over now to Jess for her presentation. Thank you, Jess.
Thanks, Kerry. Can you just confirm that my slides have come up properly?
Yes, they have. Thank you.
Beautiful. Didn't want to get too far ahead of myself. So I'm here today to talk about a pilot study completed in 2021 with full data analysis and dissemination still in progress. Bit of background, exercise during cancer treatment has been shown to provide both physical and psychological benefits and forms part of the joint position statement recently released from the Clinical Oncology Society of Australia, as well as Exercise and Sport Science Australia. On the other side, patients undergoing cancer treatment may experience symptoms of pain, fatigue, low mood, all of which have been shown to benefit from exercise. If we put these two together at the same time, however, it was still somewhat unknown. Exercise during infusion therapy is still a relatively new intervention that has been shown to be safe in a single session, but not yet evaluated for multiple infusion sessions. Patients spend a significant amount of time receiving their infusions in hospital, often around 4 hours being spent in the chair for a single session, providing an opportune time for the implementation of seated exercise. However, as exercise physiology, or EP, is an outpatient-only service at Grampians Health, there was an opportunity to partner with nursing staff in the chemotherapy day unit, or CDU, to set up and manage exercise in this setting. Therefore, the aim of this study was to determine the feasibility and acceptability of nursing supervised low intensity exercise during cancer treatment in a large regional health service. The study design was a single site mixed methods prospective cohort study that consisted of 4 phases. The study includes patients aged 18 years and over who had completed at least 1 infusion cycle already at the Grampians Health Ballarat CDU. These are the phases of the study. However, I will add that prior to starting, the protocol was co-designed with a nurse unit manager of the CDU, and we continued to meet regularly throughout the project. Phase 1 consisted of providing education to nurses in the CDU about the benefits of intra-infusion exercise and the logistics around implementation. This was achieved with formal training sessions conducted by the EP team. Phase 2 consisted of the pilot implementation. During this phase, patients were recruited into the study and offered seated cycling at a low intensity using foot pedals as pictured, whilst they were receiving their infusion. So they were already in the hospital anyway. Study participation was available on Mondays and Tuesdays only due to EP availability. EPs implemented the intervention with the patient at their first exercise session. Then nursing staff assisted and supervised subsequent sessions. Patients were surveyed at every session on functional and quality of life measures, boredom, fatigue, confidence to exercise, exercise duration, and subjective feedback. However, we didn't get off to a good start with poor referral numbers into the program, so the EP team and nursing staff collaborated again to amend the protocol in order to make the processes more streamlined for staff on the floor. Changes to protocol were needed due to COVID limitations with high staff turnover in an already stretched workforce. Remember that this was in 2021. There were challenges in trying to implement a new program in a busy area when COVID numbers were surging. Multiple staff were furloughed due to healthcare and COVID rules, and a number of bank nursing staff were required to fill shifts. Therefore, the protocol was amended to allow referrals to be emailed directly via a dedicated research email address. This allowed more timely action on a referral and less time required to complete the referral for nursing staff on the floor. An allied health assistant was engaged to further support the patient and staff after session 1. This included helping the patient complete the online surveys and set up of equipment. We allowed patients at any point in their treatment to be recruited, not just new patients as originally planned. We suspected that new patients were potentially overwhelmed when starting their treatment and that checking in again at a later date may increase uptake into the program. We provided additional resource documents which were easily accessible for nursing staff on the floor. We found that staff were helping to train each other, particularly once EP involvement decreased later on in the pilot. Phase 3 consisted of a qualitative evaluation from both nursing staff and patients. A focus group was undertaken with the nursing team to understand the experiences and the enablers and barriers to implementation, whereas individual interviews with patients via phone call explored their experiences and their perception of exercising during infusion. This data was separately coded for themes by the research team. And our last phase was to actually implement this new program as part of standard care in the oncology setting, regardless of their day of treatment. I'll circle back to this later and talk about what changes have been made to allow this to happen. We had 33 patients who were referred in and consented to be contacted by the research team. 10 were recruited into the study. Notably, 7 out of 33 were unable to participate due to available treatment days and oncologist consult days not aligning with study participation days. Patients were surveyed at both the start and end of each intra-infusion exercise session, and their results are collated as averages here. Overall, we saw a slight decrease in confidence to exercise and a decrease in reported fatigue at the end of the session compared to the start. Boredom was only measured at the end of each session and was rated on the lower half of the scale, which is pleasing. We saw an average of around 55 minutes pedalled with quite a wide range from 25 to 140 minutes. Quality of life and physical activity are still being analysed in full. However, initial analysis of the Godin Physical Activity Questionnaire shows that 4 out of 7 note some incomplete data sets there. 4 out of 7 scored in the sufficiently active category, both in their first pedalling session and their last one. 5 out of 7 did not change physical activity category between their first and last session. And 2 decreased from sufficiently active to insufficiently active from their first to last session. Quality of life data is taking a little bit more time to tease out results. I'm just noticing that part of my slide isn't coming up properly. Just let me flick ahead and flick back and see if that solves the problem. There we go. 12 nursing staff from CDU participated in the focus group. Perceived barriers included translation to all staff, given the high turnover of staff at the time, introducing the program in an already busy work environment in both physical area and time limitations, and limited program days of the week. However, overall, intra-infusion exercise was well received by CDU staff, and common themes were positive association and ownership of exercise by patients. Nursing staff support each other to implement the program. Sound processes make it easier for staff to participate. And there was an eagerness to expand the program to more days of the week. And you can see some quotes from nurses on the screen. Now I'll talk about the fabulous feedback we received from the 7 participants who were interviewed. There were 4 key themes identified. Overall, the program was perceived positively in many facets, such as enjoyment, helped to pass the time and decrease boredom, the flexibility in self-regulating their participation, symptom management, exercise outside of CDU was maintained or increased. We've even had a patient transfer to another hospital for their treatment who wanted to be able to continue pedalling during their infusion. Unfortunately, this was not possible at the time, which was really disappointing for the patient. They really missed it. Separately to that, however, we've had inquiries from a few regional hospitals with their EP or physio staff about how they can commence a similar program for their patients. So that's quite exciting. The next theme was that staff involvement facilitates exercise. Nurse support was praised in that they were organised, they were proficient in the implementation, and the equipment was easily provided. EP staff were reported to provide good education, as well as some participants were attending EP sessions as an outpatient and enjoyed that. However, procedures and paperwork were burdensome. Questionnaires were lengthy. There were many steps in the process to get started and many staff required to implement. Uptake was also seen to be low. Low participation from other patients was observed. Participants were, however, advocates for exercise. They were giving us suggestions on how to increase uptake. And finally, I'll circle back to how this has been implemented to part of usual care now. We've utilised the participant and nurse feedback to help guide our ongoing implementation, with expansion of the program to all 5 business days that CDU operates. We've streamlined the intake process for any new participant to get started, including removing the need for medical clearance from MedOnc prior to commencing. Instead, the EP who completes their intake assessment informs the oncologist rather than seeks clearance. We were finding this was a bit of a time delay for us previously. Initial screening is now also over the phone, followed by a face-to-face session with the pedals, either during the patient's next infusion session or on another day of the week in the gym. For example, when they come in to get their pre-bloods done, we can see if we can line up an appointment. We've also significantly decreased the size of the questionnaires to be filled in. It's now 1 page and on paper rather than electronic. And I've got a copy of that here. So now that this is part of usual care, the survey gets filed to the patient's medical record. We also have plans to increase advertising of the program to increase uptake and continuing to refine the education resources for both existing and new CDU nursing staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jess, for your presentation today. Again, very rich in information. And I think one of the things that's highlighted in both of our presenters so far has been the really rich, robust evaluation processes that are really enabling these programs to be further developed and delivered in a way that's going to reap the best rewards and outcomes for the patients that are participating in them. I move on to the next section of our program today, which is around the inclusion of patient-reported outcomes in the delivery of clinical care. This is essentially a long-term project that the GICS team have been progressing, led by Glenn Reeves of the GICS project team. And we're going to briefly, in a moment, show a brief video which essentially provides an overview of the SMS Pro project, talking about its rationale, why it came about in the first case, success so far, and some of the next steps associated with it. It has really been our opportunity through this project to look at exploring the integration of patient-reported outcomes measures into clinical pathways for patients undergoing cancer treatment. Like some of the other projects that we've talked about today, unfortunately, there has been COVID-related delays. And one of the things that you possibly will note in the video today is that the project started out at a much larger scale. Essentially, we had six pilot sites when we first started this process, and moved down to 5 due to a number of range of issues. And for those of you who may have been in attendance at our annual forum last year, we had an implementation science approach. We actually looked at a change management and change readiness assessment for different sites for a range of reasons, and we are now looking at moving ahead with 3 sites. It was possibly a quite ambitious project in its initial phases. I'm hoping in the background that Vicky may be able to show the video. Yes, thank you. Thank you for playing that for us, Vicky. The next section of the program we're moving into now is looking at achieving meaningful co-design in system improvement. Essentially, this is an area that the GICS team have been working towards for some time. So our 2021 grant projects definitely had a focus on patient experience in the design of those projects. And you can see that in the data that we're hearing about in terms of evaluation and the outcomes. Essentially, we have a really strong goal about moving that forward, really wanting to look at that rich experience designing the projects and being involved in that development stage rather than in reviewing what we think might work. As part of this year's grant program in 2023, we have also been able to support 5 grant projects, and a very strong part of this methodology this year will be that we will be looking at the patient voice in these. So each of our projects have been assigned a member of the GICS project team and a member of our consumer advisory group to really guide the development and inclusion of patient voice in co-design of these pieces of work. So it's really exciting for us as we begin our journey in that space to actually hear from the BAROC team today, who are much more mature in their understanding and their experiences. And I possibly didn't introduce them very well in the first part of this section, and session, and I apologise for that, because we are really excited to hear about this project today. And not only is it in the co-design space, but it certainly also speaks to other priorities areas for the GICS team in trying to deliver care closer to home wherever that is possible. So I would like to introduce the BAROC team. Essentially, the radiotherapy service at BRIC is a long-standing partnership between Grampians Health and Austin Health, which has seen a highly skilled team of radiation therapists, medical physicists and nurses partnering with radiation oncologist, Dr. Thanuja Thatchell, to deliver this new service. The expansion of the gynecology radiotherapy program has also led to the development of a consumer co-design quality improvement project championed by a previous patient. This project is focused on improving the supportive care needs of female patients, both during and after pelvic radiation therapy. The gynecological radiotherapy program was introduced in 2019, and we are joined by a panel of presenters today, which is really exciting, in Dr. Thanuja Thatchell, Lucille Scott, Janua Andrews, Michelle Braybrook, and Jamie Goldsmith to tell us more about their project. And I hand over to them now. Thank you.
My apologies. Can everyone see that screen okay?
We can see the slide deck, but not just the front screen, Vic. So if you play it.
Is that okay now?
We can see the note view. That's better. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yep.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to present regarding the consumer co-design project for the female pelvic radiotherapy patients attending BAROC. Can I have the next slide, please? You've already introduced my team. I'm Thanuja, radiation oncologist, and along with me is Gino, Michelle Braybrook, Jamie, and Lucille Scott. Can I have the next slide, please? So with our background, prior to 2019, Ballarat and BAROC was not offering much gynae radiation services at all due to multiple factors. Can I have the next slide? So I came to Ballarat in 2019, and I quickly noticed this deficit as I had done gynae radiation interstate for 2 decades. What really motivated me was patient stories and also COVID. Can we move to the next slide? So I would like to start with some patient stories. In 2019, when I came, a 67-year-old lady was referred to me for treatment of her locally advanced, very symptomatic vulvar cancer from Melbourne. She was full-time carer for her husband. She had financial issues, and there was no way she could travel to Melbourne for treatment. We treated her with 6 weeks of chemoradiotherapy, and she remains disease-free to date and very thankful to us. Next slide, please. The next patient was a 28-year-old single mom of 5 children. Youngest was only a few months old, and she had hardly any social support. She had limited understanding. She lived in social housing. She had mental health issues, and she was extremely non-engaging with the healthcare system, a typical regional patient. She was diagnosed with stage 1 cervical cancer in January 2021 and was planned to be treated at Melbourne with surgery, which would have been curative at that point in time. However, she defaulted a lot of appointments, and finally, by the time she presented, unfortunately, she had stage 3 disease, which meant this was incurable with surgery and required chemoradiation. So we treated her with chemoradiotherapy of 5 weeks at BAROC. It was a Herculean task to make her attend, thanks to all the team members. And then she received brachytherapy at Melbourne, and this lady also remains disease-free to date. Next slide, please. So I told these stories just to highlight the importance that local or regional patients are very complex, and particularly when it comes to gynae radiation. Most of these gynae patients are young, they have school-age kids, and it's not in their best interest to dislocate them from their familiar circumstances and support network of family and friends at the most challenging time of the cancer diagnosis and send them to Melbourne for 5 to 6 weeks of treatment. And hence the requirement of establishing gynae radiation at Ballarat, which we did in 2019, in collaboration with Metro teams, Austin, Peter Mac, and Mercy Hospital. I require this collaboration as one part of the gynae treatment, which is internal radiation or brachytherapy, is not available at Ballarat. And this was seamlessly done, even without any care coordinators. And this is a prime example of interinstitutional collaboration benefiting regional patients. Can I have the next slide? And this is what we achieved. You can see the patient numbers increasing from 2019. Next slide, please. To date, we have treated around 50 gynae cancer patients with radiation. Now, a snapshot into the patient's journey once they referred for radiation. At the time of initial consultation, they consented. They are linked with a supportive care network. They get a radiation planning scan done, and then we need a few days to get the radiation plan ready. Once a plan is ready, the treatment is daily for 4 to 5 weeks. And depending upon the subsite, they would then need internal radiation, which has to be done at Melbourne. And 5 to 6 weeks later, they come for the first follow-up, and thereafter, they require 3 to 4 monthly follow-up up to 5 years. I would like to highlight some of the late side effects of radiation to pelvis, which are vaginal stenosis, sexual problems resulting from that, as well as postmenopausal symptoms. As we started treating more and more cancer patients, these became more evident. And based on a consumer feedback, we decided to embark upon a consumer co-design project to further improve the survivorship outcomes for these patients. Prior to this, we were just providing the standard supportive care. Next slide. I would like to hand over now to Jinu to continue the talk.
Thanks, Tanuja. Hi, everyone. We have heard from Tanuja about some of the side effects of pelvic radiotherapy. Some of these side effects may persist or worsen after the completion of radiotherapy treatment and can continue during the survivorship phase. You can see here the various late side effects associated with pelvic radiotherapy, which can significantly impact the overall well-being of female patients. Some of the long-term side effects, such as vaginal stenosis, menopausal symptoms, as well as long-term bowel and bladder issues, can have detrimental effects on young female patients. During the survivorship phase, it is very important to provide supportive care to these patients to help maintain their quality of life and effectively manage these issues. Current practice at BAROC is that the supportive care screening occurs at the start of radiotherapy treatment. There is no formal process of rescreening at the end of radiotherapy treatment. You can see in here the snippet of a mixed method study on gynecological cancer patients. This study highlights the importance of support and long-term follow-up for young gynecological cancer survivors. We hope that this co-design project will enable us to develop some action plans to enhance the supportive care for female patients post-pelvic radiotherapy treatment. Next slide, please. I'll provide an overview of the supportive care practices we were engaged in before the start of this project and the additional actions we have taken since the initiation of this project. As we all know, supportive care is an important part of comprehensive cancer care, and we've heard from Tanuja that gynecological cancer patients face unique challenges throughout their cancer treatment journey. Supportive care plays a critical role in ensuring that these patients receive the support they need to manage their symptoms and improve their quality of life. Since initiating this co-design project, our consumer has guided us in understanding the significance of supportive care and better ways in which we can assist patients. In terms of patient assessment and support, as I mentioned earlier, we have patients complete the supportive care screening tool at the initial consultation appointment with the radiation oncologist. We use a validated screening tool here at BAROC, which includes a verbal distress rating scale and problem checklist. Patients self-complete this form in preparation for a supportive care discussion with nursing staff. During the supportive care consultation, we discuss all the identified issues on the supportive care screening tool and we ensure that the appropriate support services are in place before the patient starts their radiotherapy treatment. Along with the supportive care screening tool, we now also complete a comprehensive assessment and risk evaluation record. This helps the team to develop a tailored plan of care, identify any potential complications or risk, and address any specific needs or concerns. We also looked at our referral pathway and extended our referrals. Previously, we were referring our pelvic patients to in-house allied health staff, but we are now discussing with patients the importance of having early referrals to physio, sexual health nurse consultant, and colorectal cancer coordinator. We also discussed the VCCC psycho-oncology referrals with patients. Regarding the consumer information pack, at the initial nursing encounter, we provide information about the Grampians Health Wellness Center. This information covers the services offered at Grampians Health Wellness Center, support programs, and their contact information. Additionally, we now distribute a copy of sexual health booklet called Recovering After Pelvic Radiotherapy to each female patient undergoing pelvic radiotherapy at BAROC. We do that, we give the booklet out at the first nursing encounter. This booklet will discuss some of the late side effects of radiotherapy that may affect post-treatment pelvic health and sexual life. Prior to onboarding on this project, the sexual health booklet was given as the final nursing encounter. Big thanks to Jamie, who helped us add these resources for our patients. We hope to add more resources and improve our supportive care services on completion of this project. I will now hand over to Jamie to talk about consumer involvement in our project. Thank you.
Thanks, Jinyu. Hi everyone, my name's Jamie and I've been lucky to come on board with this working group as a consumer. So I was diagnosed with colorectal cancer in 2019 and I went through my treatment here at Grampians Health Services. I underwent surgery, I had 6 months of chemotherapy and I also had 5 weeks of radiotherapy here at BAROC. Whilst my experience was a positive one in that all of the individuals that treated me were wonderful and certainly the team here at BAROC were as well. I felt very supported and informed along the way. I felt that in the post-treatment phase that there was some gaps in supportive care. My background is in ICU nursing rather, and I felt that there was just, I had difficulty in finding information in regards to menopause and also, late toxicities. And I felt that I was flailing around a little bit in terms of finding information and support. And I'll lead into that soon. I'd like to highlight that as a patient that radiotherapy is a really, really challenging treatment to get through. In terms of, surgery and chemotherapy, I would definitely say that it's one of the more challenging treatments to get through. And most patients that I know definitely echo that statement. And so with regards to that, supportive care is really crucial to get patients through this treatment. It's great that in 2023 we can get patients through to remission and through to a cure, but I think it's really important that as a health service we think about the experience for the patient as well as they move into that survivorship phase. So on to the next point there, that I felt like that with my nursing background, if I was health literate and still really struggling in this post-treatment phase, I wondered and I worried what other women were doing and how they were getting that information that can be life-changing. So I set about giving feedback. So it was Simone Reeves at the time that was head of unit. And so, I asked if I could provide her some feedback. She was incredibly gracious with her time and met with me. And from there, it kind of snowballed into this working group, which was wonderful. And lastly, so it just leads into the way that the BAROC team have organised this, I think would be the gold standard. Not only did they take on the feedback and be seen to be doing something with it or just take it on board, they've actually tried to improve the, the patients of the future in their treatment. Also, my seat at the table doesn't feel like a tokenistic one. I feel very much a part of the group. My advice and my opinions are carefully listened to. If I'm not able to attend a meeting, they're always rescheduled. So I think that, the BAROC team have done a great job and definitely set the standard for doing co-design projects and involving consumers. And the other thing that I wanted to highlight is that after a patient has been through treatment, it's really not at the forefront of their mind to provide feedback. In fact, most patients really just want to go back to their normal daily life and really want to close the chapter on cancer treatment. So I think regardless of where you work, if you're in a position to have a consumer that's taken the time to provide feedback, that you should try to see that as a really valuable opportunity to potentially incite change in your service. And I will hand over now to Michelle.
Thank you, Jamie. So my name's Michelle. I'm the clinical trial coordinator here at BAROC, and generally speaking, in these little projects that we do, my role is in project startup. So in particular, I usually help with writing the protocol, development of questionnaires and consent forms, also look at the data analysis and result interpretation as we go along. However, this project was slightly different. It's the first time that BAROC had done a purely consumer-led project, and myself personally hadn't been involved in starting up a consumer-led project. So with all that in mind, there was no established processes for recruiting or onboarding or even just how to kick the project off. Importantly, and as I moved on down the track with the project, there was no in-house consumer liaison person either. So right from the get-go, we knew I had to do a lot of upskilling just to get the team ready to go, and also to make sure that we had an inclusive and welcoming environment for Jamie. We wanted to do a good job and make a program that's useful for our patients. So I attended a number of consumer workshops and webinars, and probably some of the better ones were through VCCC. I know they do free monthly webinars, but they also have a consumer workshop a couple of days of the year, every year, and that was a really good resource. Monash Partners was also exceptional with their resources, so I did a lot of research around that just to try and find, I suppose, the gold standard for onboarding of a consumer. Patient experience teams were really helpful as well. So being at BAROC, I had access to both Austin Health and Grampians Health patient experience teams, and they were great in just understanding, I suppose, organisational requirements and making sure we were covered in that regard as well. Next slide, please. So I was probably a little bit naive when we started. We had Jamie, so I was like, yep, all good. We can start up as per usual. And then it was a little bit easier said than done, I think. The first challenge that most people find was finding the right consumer. We missed that challenge, thank goodness, because we had Jamie, and Jamie's turned out to be so valuable for this project. But I think anyone starting out a project, that's probably the first hurdle, just trying to find the right consumer for the project or the role that you want them to fill. I know patient experience teams are wonderful for that, and GICS as well can be really helpful with finding the right consumer for you. I think hand-in-hand documentation was something that we spent a lot of time on. So with the onboarding, you need to create a position description, cover letter, induction package, consumer evaluation form, particularly for our role with radiotherapy. If you've ever been involved in it, it can be another language on its own. So we created a glossary of terms, which we thought would come in useful. And then we've created some workflows and standard operating procedures so we can repeat the process for our next project as well. Importantly, we didn't reinvent the wheel for this. There are lots of templates out there that cover all those essential documents that I said. Again, VCCC was really handy, and Australian Clinical Trials, I forgot the name of it, but Australian Clinical Trials Alliance was also really helpful. So we meshed a number of those documents just to create a document that was fit for our purpose. The patient experience team, I've mentioned how crucial they were. They were really great for understanding the organisational requirements, and again can help with that onboarding of a consumer. So the advertising and the interviewing of candidates, doing your police checks, and when you're working with children checks, also doing your confidentiality agreement as well. Importantly, they're there to help support the consumer as well. So it's handy to have someone outside of the project team that Jamie can go to and get some support if she needs it as well. I mentioned the consumer liaison person, and we were probably a little bit naive as to what that actually was or what it actually meant, but it's a crucial role if you're going to have a consumer on your project. So I'm Jamie's, I don't call myself a consumer liaison person, but if Jamie has any problems or needs help with anything, I'm the person she turns to. And likewise, I make sure Jamie's got access to our meetings, that she's got the papers that we need reviewed or the results that we need to go over, and just make sure everyone keeps on track. So it's really important to have someone doing that role. It is a little bit of work, but it's definitely worth it. Staff and consumer training, again, we wanted to make sure we have that inclusive environment for Jamie. So at the time Jamie was onboarded, we had no standardized consumer training at Austin Health or at Grampians Health. So we had to do, again, a little bit of research as to what would be suitable for us. And Monash Partners had a really good program that we've used. So everyone on our project team has completed those training modules, and Jamie also completed, there's consumer modules in there. So Jamie completed those consumer modules, and I think we all got something out of completing those modules. Something else to consider is your IT access and mandatory training. Luckily or unluckily for us, Jamie was onboarded at the peak of COVID, so everything was via Teams. So our process is quite streamlined there. And last but not least is remuneration for consumers. So this is a really big topic in the last 18 months or so, where consumers are remunerated for their role on a project or committee or whatever they're involved in. So I do know VCCC and Peter Mac, and I think the Alfred have policies in place for that. I know Austin Health currently don't, but they're revising their process, well, revising the remuneration process currently, so there'll be something out shortly. But if you're starting a project, they're probably all the things that you need to think about before you get your consumer or once you've got it. I think I am now handing over to Lucille, who's just going to give a bit of a project update.
Thanks, Michelle. Hi, everyone. I'm Lucille. I'm the radiation therapist representative for this project group. I just wanted to speak to you very briefly about the project design and some of the very early data we've collected so far. So here you can see our aim for the project is to improve the supportive care we provide to women undergoing pelvic radiation therapy at BAROC. So this was instigated by Jamie, our consumer representative. And you can see we've divided it into 2 stages in this schematic of the project here, with stage 1 focused on acquiring feedback from women who have gone through the current supportive care pathway to identify common areas of improvement. You can see that this is the same treatment process that Tanuja spoke about earlier, but we've just highlighted in yellow where the study-specific activities will occur. So on the left, you've got the project information given before treatment, consent during treatment, vaginal dilator education at the first RO follow-up, and the questionnaire finally given at the second RO follow-up. So in both stages, we will be using questionnaires to capture both quantitative and qualitative data. And in terms of the questionnaire, it does cover a vast array of questions, but the key areas you can see here that we cover are demographics, pre-treatment, during treatment, post-treatment information, vaginal dilator information, and supportive care and referrals. So in terms of the type of questions that we asked, I guess an example of a post-treatment information question is, did you seek help from other medical specialists after completing your radiotherapy treatment? In terms of a question regarding the vaginal dilators, we ask if they found it useful. And an example of a question regarding referrals is, would a referral to other allied health professionals, for example, continence physio, sexual health nurse consultant, clinical psychologist or physio, would that have been helpful for the post-radiotherapy support for you? So at the bottom here, stage 2 doesn't have much because it'll be focused on the review of changes made, but it will follow exactly the same process as stage 1 above, with the key difference being that this will take place approximately 6 months after the new supportive care package has been implemented. And we hope to give these out to 40 different women who will go through the new process that we implement. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we're very much in the early stages of recruitment for stage 1, but we did want to share some of the data we've collected so far. So the primary diagnosis of the women we've recruited so far are endometrial, cervical, anus, and colorectal. And we currently have an N of 16 for a total of 40 women for stage 1. So almost halfway, which is great. And in terms of the demographics we've collected so far, age and postcode, we hope will be key to us in delivering a more tailored approach to the supportive care for these women. There's a mean age of 62, and in terms of postcode, almost half of the women sampled are travelling greater than an hour from their home to get to treatment at BAROC. So in terms of the areas of concern that have been highlighted in the data, there's been bladder and bowel issues, pain, and sexual well-being. Pain is something that the women unfortunately experience towards the end of treatment, also after treatment, and very likely during the pelvic exams, which is part of routine follow-up, where vaginal stenosis is a common side effect, as mentioned by the Nuja and Janu earlier. An area of improvement that is becoming evident is a referral to a gynecologist, with almost half of the women agreeing that it would be very beneficial for their post-radiotherapy support. In addition, we have 100% of our patients wanting to have their treatment regionally, and this does touch on what the Nuja mentioned earlier about the importance of keeping patients close to home, where their support networks are, to help facilitate better patient outcomes. And lastly, the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. So there's a couple of examples here, but it is also great that we've received some more constructive feedback to help guide the new supportive care package we're creating. So we had one of the women suggesting a vaginal dilator model or a video to have been a little bit more useful, and as well as more information and discussion regarding anal dilators as well. So the results, it's very early, but it's very promising, and we're excited about completing stage 1 and progressing on to the next phase. So I will hand over back to Michelle, please.
Thanks, Liz. So we just wanted to quickly touch base on the benefits of collaborating with the consumer. I think we've made it pretty obvious that without Jamie's feedback, this project probably wouldn't have happened. She was really the catalyst to get this project happening, and I suppose putting an ongoing quality improvement into the project as well. Definitely, Jamie has improved the quality of the questionnaire, as you could imagine, and I think as Lucille touched on, the questionnaire can be quite sensitive in terms of the questions. So the wording around that was really important, and Jamie was really helpful in getting that wording right. Something that was probably a little bit unexpected was Jamie has kept us, really, the whole research team, accountable. So we hardly miss meetings. Only if we're all sick is anything rescheduled, and everyone completes their action items prior to each meeting. So I think we're all aware that Jamie is in a volunteer position, and we don't want to let her down. So it has helped taking the project along. And a take-home message that I've kind of stolen from Jamie, because I've heard her speak a number of times now, so I hope you don't mind. But I just want to echo the importance and the value of consumer feedback. And if you're lucky enough to have a consumer want to give you feedback, make the time and the space to listen to them and hopefully action it as well if possible. And I think next slide is yours, Tanisha.
Thank you. So to conclude, the take-home messages is establishing a new service in regional Australia can be very challenging, as we all know. I strongly believe that every patient has the right to be treated closer to home and receive quality treatment. And the best way to do is persist and perceive. Just don't wait to have a care coordinator. We still don't have one. We would like to have one in future. However, it's most important to listen to consumers and involve them from the start, if you could, not only to start the project, but to improve the project and keep improving the project. It's very important to listen to consumers. Next slide, please. I would like to acknowledge a vast team who made it possible to deliver gynae radiation services at Ballarat. Next slide, please. And I think together we have achieved a lot. Thanks, everyone, for giving us the opportunity to present.
Thank you so much to the BAROC team for your presentation today. I think what comes across really strongly when you present is your passion, your commitment, and not only that, the collaboration that we see in you as a team to really look towards developing something and to be really open to feedback in the continual development of that. So thank you. So that concludes the formal presentations for today. And we did have an open Q&A session that's been running throughout the session. I have to say that most of what we've had in the Q&A has been comments, more sort of, I guess, praise, which is a lovely thing. So lots of comments around great presentations, fantastic initiatives, and really it being great to hear about regional reach for some of these pieces of work. So we're certainly involving a lot of partners and really trying to provide care close to home where possible, and also to share the learnings amongst the network. So that's really great to see. There was only one other question. I'm just going to quickly check because it was just another positive praise coming through, which is lovely. The only other question that has come through that I will answer live was actually in relation to the SMS Pro project. And this asked how does the tool alert clinicians about the reportable symptoms that they see? So each of the sites, the 3 project sites, well, the initial 5 and the current 3 pilot sites, have an individualised questionnaire that goes out to the patients, and there is a matrix that then comes back to the clinician, which is a priority system. So it is flagged on which symptoms need to be followed up more urgently. There was a second part to that question, which was, does this model align with the CIRC model of care? And the answer to that is loosely it does. So one of our pilot sites is the Horsham Cancer Centre. They don't have a CIRC clinic, they have a SMEC clinic, which is provides a similar service, just a different acronym. And certainly it is informing their practice and their response to the patients. So we are trialling patient-reported outcomes in a chemotherapy day unit setting, and we'll be able to feedback on that. So this sort of brings us, I guess, to the final part of today's session, and Vicky's probably trying to juggle many things in the background in terms of...
one more question there.
One more question? Oh, okay, thank you. So this is relating to Jamie. So a last minute question. Jamie's experience indicates the importance of consumer feedback. How can this be embedded in Grampians health quality improvement processes and projects? And I think that this is something, it's certainly something that the GICS team have a long history of doing. So Ian is actually a member of our very strong and committed consumer advisory group at GICS. And we have recently partnered with the consumer partnership team at Grampians Health, and there is definitely an opportunity for lived experience wherever possible in these projects, and we certainly take that on board. So thank you for that reminder.
Contact Jamie, so I'm sure that she will be very happy to be involved and she'll be very popular. I have to say I've been a radiation oncologist for 25 years, and I don't necessarily understand everything from a consumer's point of view. Yeah. And that would be, I think it will be common for many other disciplines. So it's extremely important to hear from the consumers, because our questionnaire has 200% change based on her feedback.
Yeah.
And this is with an experienced team. So always, I'm sure Jamie can, sorry to volunteer on your behalf, Jamie, but you're in that.
Oh, that's fine. No worries at all. Happy to help.
Yeah, I think it is a very important point, Thanuja, because Jamie is very committed and passionate. And I think that is, I think, Michelle, you might have said that if you have a patient who's willing to be part of the process and to share their learnings, they're rich. And they do very much, give us a different perspective in the planning process. And sitting everybody at the table is definitely going to reap better rewards. So yes, thank you. So I'm mindful of time. I will conclude the Q&A session at this time. There is obviously opportunity outside of the forum. If people have questions, we're more than happy to try and get those answers for you. So please feel free to reach out to the GICS team if there's something that you triggers a question later. And I'm not sure, Vic, how we've gone with the presentation. Yeah, thank you. So just briefly in follow up. So today has been an opportunity to showcase some of the work that GICS is working on with our partners, and also some of the other things that are happening in the region where we're supportive or learning from. The other opportunity that will showcase our work from the last 12 months will come via the GICS annual report. We had hoped that it would be available today. Circumstances beyond our control have prevented that from happening, but it certainly is well into development and will be available and released soon. In terms of the next 12 months, there's a number of things that you will see that are progressing. So the SMS Pro pilot will conclude in the first quarter of 2024. And that will really give us some great intel in terms of, how best to implement patient-reported outcomes into the clinical pathway, what some of the barriers have been. And that's been a long-standing project. We've learned lots along the way, and we keep perfecting things. So it'll inform next steps. We'll also see the conclusion of our current grants round. So we have 5 service improvement projects underway. So we'll see some outcomes from those projects. The other thing that we will see is outcomes from the evaluation. So one of the things that we're really keen to do is to learn from each grants program to inform the next one. Our next grants program, we tend to run them every second year. So the next grants program will be available to the sector in 2025. And part of our evaluation will look at the model that we've used this year, which is very much heavily relying on our consumer advisory group in assisting the design of these projects. So part of that evaluation will include our consumers' experience in that space to learn from that as well. One of the other things that we're currently working on with an event coming up in the next month is the development of a regional colorectal cancer pathway. There is a networking event. We're currently undertaking an audit against that pathway to inform areas for service improvement activity that will guide some of our work plan activities in the year ahead. The other thing that will come in the next few months is the delivery or introduction of cancer optimal care pathway dashboards. And this again will provide us a baseline and an opportunity to identify areas for service improvement. So much more targeted in some of the activities we're able to see improvement in and know where we should put our best efforts. The last part there is pretty much a continuation of work that is underway. Many of our projects are aimed at increasing the identification of people's supportive and survivorship care needs and ensuring that they're able to access services closer to home where that is possible. And there are a number of projects in that space that are currently underway. We move through to the next screen, please, Vicky. This is a shameless plug on my behalf. There are a number of different forums that are happening across the VIX network currently, and this is a summary of those that haven't as yet happened. I won't leave the screen up for long enough for people to take down the details, but if you are wanting to know more about some of the other forums, then we're more than happy to provide details and to link you in appropriately. And we'll move on to the next screen, please, Vicky. And along that line, just some information about how best to contact us. We certainly, annually, we do release our annual report, as I mentioned. We also provide a quarterly newsletter. We have a strong distribution list, but if you are wanting to sign up for that, that's the best way of probably keeping up to date with some of the opportunities that are upcoming, whether they're around service improvement grants or professional development grants, or just hearing about the progress of our projects. The other opportunity to do that is via our website, where we often provide project updates. But just on an everyday basis, it's an opportunity for us to hear from our project partners and to perhaps, hear about things that we're less aware of that may also be areas of priority for activity and opportunities to network with other people in bringing about change where that's needed. And just the final slide, please, Vicky. So we've formally reached the conclusion of today's session. I do want to strongly take this opportunity to sincerely thank our presenters today, not only for giving of their time, but also for sharing their really important learnings. I think it's a great opportunity to hear about the work of others, and I think people have been really honest about the challenges and provided really tangible experiences that we can all learn from. I also want to acknowledge that the achievement of our targets as a team is heavily reliant on our ability to work in partnership with our very dedicated and skilled stakeholders across the region. And we take this opportunity to thank our partners for their ongoing support of the GICS team and for our broader program of work. At the conclusion of today's session, so once we hit the stop button, in the browser, you will see three very brief evaluation questions pop up. And if I could please ask you to spend possibly 1 or 2 minutes completing that would be really valuable to us. We certainly want to keep providing annual forums that are useful for people and also showcasing our work. So if you have feedback, we'd love to hear that. So it will sort of end and then they'll pop up pretty quickly is my understanding. And so finally, just on behalf of the GICS Governance Group, the GICS Consumer Advisory Group and the GICS Project team, I would like to thank you all for your attendance and participation at today's forum. And I do look forward to seeing you hopefully at one of our future forums, and thank you and good afternoon. Bye-bye.